Hello, hello. Time for some Type 40, a little extra Type 40 just for you here on the Spacebook channel with me, Dan Hadley, Birmingham's king of the geeks. So Type 40 extra, what's all that about then? Well, it's our before show, after show, and in between show. In between all those podcasts and live streams that we put out as Type 40 with the Fandom Podcast Network, all over the podcatchers and on YouTube too. Just a little time and space where we can have those conversations that are even too geeky for all of that gets stuck into the nooks and the crannies of all things Doctor Who. And I've got just the guy to join me on this particular journey. He's one of the most distinctive of all the Who tubers out there. But not only that, he's a publisher and comic books expert too, as the writer of the Ice Warriors comic strip, that one page, a black and white one pager. I can't remember where I first saw that, several years before I met the man himself. It's the one, the only Svila Betkin, the Rabbi from another planet.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. I'm good.
Like
you were the yes, so the legend goes. But you were the first
about that.
But you were the first person that I could think of when I thought I want to talk about this. There's only one guy that I can talk about it with. But before we get stuck into that, please like the video now. You're going to be having far too much fun later on. You like the video now. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and check to see if you're still subscribed. If you think you are, because yeah, they unsubscribe people. Heaven knows why. So yeah, like the video, subscribe to the channel.
Yeah, I have a rough idea why.
we couldn't possibly say. Say. Before we get into all of that, I wondered if you'd seen this, mate, because I thought this could be right up your street. Now, what do you think? What do you think that this could be?
It's a pub with a very TARDIS-like doors. Is that in Soho? It looks like a kind of posh central London pub, but it looks kind of too quiet for that. It's a pub with very blue TARDIS-y doors. That's as far as I can get.
Yeah, it's used to be a nightclub called Merlin's in the town of Burton. And it has been recently converted into a drop-in place for people to hang out and read up on geeky stuff, like a sort of geek retreat. So people will take their graphic novels in there and whatnot.
I would so go there. That sounds awesome. That sounds really, really cool.
Yeah, I thought you'd like it.
I take it. Like you can get coffee and alcohol there.
That's the only drawback. They've taken everything off tap. It's not licensed anymore.
Honestly, if you can get a coffee there, I'm fine with it. That will certainly do me. Isn't Burton the town where they that weird fake Doctor Who was being made in the 90s? Do you remember this guy who said he was right around the car saying the new Doctor Who? I think that was in Burton.
Oh,
I can't remember.
That was a guy called David Burton.
There you go. Thank you for.
I don't know if he actually lived. I don't know if he actually lived. Probably never know. He's still around, and I think he did turn up on the special features to one DVD or another.
That is one of my favorite special features. Right? It's where it was Gary Russell talking about it, and Gary Russell, because he was the editor of Doctor Who magazine at the time, said if anybody has any actual evidence of this, I will pay you $100 million. Like, it never happened, right? It never. Everything the guy said probably isn't true, right? They said they filmed like 2 episodes, and they had a police box, not a police box, a telephone box, a TARDIS, and none of that happened, right? None of that happened. I maybe it did, but I don't believe it did. But it's a fascinating.
I think it happened in his mind. Maybe he was out in Merlin's when it was a nightclub called Merlin's originally. It's been closed for 10 years, this place. It's now called Books and Banter. Its original name, when it was just a sort of pub, was Sloppy Joe's. So you can get the idea of what kind of establishment this was. But I thought that this was the ideal place, really, for us to sit down and sort of virtually chat about all of this. You are just as deep into comic books and the Doctor Who comic book history as I am. And were you a reader of Doctor Who magazine from the very first issue?
When it first came out, it was 78. I think I was 7. And my mother picked it up for me. I remember I got the odd issue of the weekly, but it was around when it was monthly, around issue. It was in the early 80s when I started reading it myself.
Me too. I wasn't there quite from the beginning.
It was, I think, the first comic strip was the end of 4-Dimensional Vistas with Mick Austin doing the art, and then it went into John Ridgway, and it started his run. And that for me is the archetypal run of Doctor Who comics. I mean, the David Gibbons stuff, fantastic. But for me, the place in my heart will always be those John Ridgway years, which I absolutely adore. Or maybe you don't either. I don't know.
Start with Colin and go.
You seem to be nonplussed about that. I'm sorry.
No. Well, I think he started. I'm trying to remember exactly when he started. I think it was with Colin, and then he ran through a little into Sylvester originally, didn't he? And now and again he goes.
He was the first artist on Colin's first story, right? You had Steve Dillon. That's what it was. You had 4-Dimensional Vistas, right? And then that went into the moderator. Was it the moderator? The one with the guy who looked like a giant frog. The artwork was by Steve Dillon. And that's where Gus left, as I recall.
That's right. Definitely Steve Dillon doing those.
Right. And then the next issue was John Ridgway, and that's how they moved from Davison into Colin Baker, where they said they're looking for. It was kind of a sequel, right? They're looking for the Doctor, the Peter Davison.
That's right.
Doctor, but he might also look like Colin Baker, right? And that introduced Frobisher, the Whiffle Dill, whatever he's called. Companion. So that is my that's my prime era of Doctor Who comics.
It was a great time to be reading it. I mean, I remember as soon when they lost Dave Gibbons off the strip, because he carried on drawing it, didn't he, into the Davison stuff. When they lost him, they struggled, and they got Steve Dillon. They got an artist called Mick Austin, both really distinctive artists.
But they didn't have like an identity. And I think Lee Sullivan did the same thing when John Ridgway left. Right, they had other artists like Arthur Ranter stuff on that McCoy. It's beautiful. Fellow Travelers. It's one of the most beautiful artwork in Doctor Who comics I think ever. But it wasn't like an identity. Then Lee Sullivan came along, who was very 90s, right? Very 90s. It was a bit more cartoonish. The heads were a little bit bigger, but his likenesses were good. He was very, very popular. He could draw a Dalek from any angle. At a drop of a hat. He was very good at that, and that's why I think he became, a superstar Doctor Who artist, which is why I think he's back now.
Yeah, I couldn't believe it when I read in all of this that he hadn't worked on Doctor Who for 20 years, or certainly not for Doctor Who magazine. And to be fair, I mean, you and I, we've both been following this. Doctor Who magazine hasn't had the easiest few years. It's the official magazine of the BBC TV series, they proudly say there. But of course, the TV show itself has been suffering. You and I have talked about it hours and hours and hours.
It's much harder to sell ancillary merchandise around a show that nobody likes. It's like when people very much like it is very popular. Do you remember all the merchandise we had? Right, and that all just dried up over the last 5 years. And the change is so palpable. Right, in Doctor Who magazine, it's so like there was Doctor Who magazine kind of went through this like weird phase of like first belligerently being angrily supportive of the Jodie Whittaker years, right? They were like, yes, Jodie's the best, and anyone else like it, and then people stopped buying it, and we had about a good 2 years around COVID, started around COVID when it was like. They were like living in, it was like the French occupation, right? They were like, okay, we can't sell this. I understand. So we'll try and keep it to minimum.
The wins seem to be completely taken from their sales. And and in both senses of the word sales, you could tell they felt really deflated by it. The magazine lost its spark, lost its creativity. You really could. And the comic strip that's been in my view, it may not be central to the appeal of the magazine as it is now, and probably hasn't been for a really long time. I think Marcus Hearn talks about that in this issue. But yeah, without Doctor Who magazine, without the Doctor Who comic strip, it wouldn't quite be the same. And when they couldn't afford to produce the comic strip during the pandemic, and it was gone.
Right.
I know they tried to fill the gap, didn't they, with a couple of text stories and things like that. It lost something.
They tried. I mean, for the life of me, why they didn't start reprinting some of the backup strips we hadn't seen the light of day. Like there's tons of them. They're just reprinting that the Dalek one now from the first issue in the new Dalek collection, but it's not quite enough to get me to buy it. Right, but why they didn't do that, and it wouldn't have different doctors in it. They were all focused on monsters, and the artwork's there. You own it. You have the rights to it. Why not just run it? Right, I think
the strips as well that premiered in the Incredible Hulk Presents that never actually were in the magazine, and they've never been in that magazine. They could have put those in its place and said, okay, this isn't technically repeated material because it's never been in this magazine before.
I can understand why they wouldn't want to have a different doctor than Jodie. And that's probably something to do with the BBC licensing, quite frankly.
Yeah,
right. I can understand why they wouldn't want to do that, but again, like, a doctor list strip, which they already have, right? I mean, it's in hand, it's ready to go, right? And they've cleaned them all up as well for these
new editions.
The graphic novels. They could have done Absalom Dak, right? Absalom Dak had a great run. It's again Steve Dillon, then David Lloyd. You could have had a good 6 months fill-in. Just reprinting that stuff, and people would have freaking loved it, right? People would have freaking loved it. Alternatively, they could have found like fan artists who wanted to get their work to a wider audience. But again, the spark was gone for a Doctor Who magazine. There was like whatever. It was like you felt their depression, right? You really did. There was no.
Remembering now, you've got me remembering when Lee Sullivan brought Absalom Dark back for Nemesis of the Daleks.
Wasn't it great?
And for the Daleks. Oh man, yeah, it was. It was great. Really exciting. Ironically, a lot of the most creative things happened with Doctor Who when it was off the screen.
Yeah, listen, like the 89 to like 96 or 2005 rather, I would say. We had Virgin New Adventures, BBC Books, Big Finish. We had. It was great. In fact, I think one of my only letters that was ever published in Doctor Who magazine was during that time when I said, "Look, we've never had it this good, right? There's so much Doctor Who. It's fantastic."
How many letters did you have published all in all? Can you remember?
Probably in. I can't remember.
Well, yeah. It could well be that we're about to enter a new golden era for Doctor Who, and I think there's definitely a sense of prestige and a fun that's returned to the magazine literally overnight with the complete revamp of the entire brand. It's been extraordinary to see. I mean, on screen we've just seen, haven't we? We've just witnessed the most savoured regeneration of all time on BBC One just 3 or 4 weeks ago now.
You know what? I want to say something complimentary. It's one of the most beautiful. It looks very, very good.
You think?
They did an excellent job. Sorry?
It didn't work. This didn't work for me. The 13 regeneration didn't.
Really? I thought that looks pretty. I preferred it from the. I preferred it to the Matt Smith into Capaldi regeneration. I thought that one dragged on too long.
It did, yeah.
And I think the same thing with the David Tennant into Matt Smith. And I don't think they really knew what they were doing that much with Eccleston into Tennant. But so I think I thought the visuals of this was very nice. Even Jodie Whittaker this was her best moment playing the Doctor. And I'm not just saying that because she was going. It was the one that she had delivered a line. I thought, oh, that's like the Doctor might say.
It was a nice line.
Yeah,
it was a nice line. I will give them that. But visually, it just left me completely cold. And I think the way it was sort of animated, it reminds me of one of the later Pixar movies, one of the not so good ones. It has the sense of just not seeming real at all. It looks like to me an animated sort of CGI film. Right. But it left me largely unmoved, apart from the air punch of the reality that Jodie Whittaker was finally going. But yeah, for the first time ever, though, the story is picking up with Doctor Who magazine. in issue 584, the beginning of this epic new comic strip adventure, written by Alan Barnes and illustrated by Lee Sullivan, the returning Doctor Who comic strip artist. Lee Sullivan there picks up directly where the Power of the Doctor left off in this latest edition of the official Doctor Who magazine, which they say in the blurb is available from WH Smith's and selected supermarkets across the country, but nobody can find this. Have you heard? It's instantly
sold out. It's sold out. My guess is they're going to go to a second printing, and I bet they can't even believe it. Right? They were so close to cancellation. They were down to 16,000 a month circulation, and it was and when you hit 12, that's cancellation. And the only reason they're at 16 is because you had 4,000 worldwide, which you didn't have with other magazines, right? They are so freaking lucky to still be going. This is also a big coup because you normally need to have a Doctor have to have a first full adventure on screen before you can put them in alternate media. That's like a BBC branding rule, right? But I think Russell has a lot of juice, has a lot of clout, and he also said, "Well, it's David Tennant. It's not technically a new Doctor." Although he keeps saying it is, so I think he says one thing to the BBC executives, another thing to the fans. So I think this is a brilliant way of bridging the gap between the Power of the Doctor and the David Tennant special, because this is in its essence, it's apocryphal, right? It's not canon. It is apocryphal, and it's part of one's head canon, if you want. Because when they arrive, this is basically because when David Tennant shows up, there is going to be no connective tissue whatsoever to Power of the Doctor or the Jodie Whittaker years, right? And the TARDIS is going to be different. The sonic screwdriver is going to be, we've even seen the sonic screwdriver already. Yeah. It's going to be different. And they're not going to stop and they're not going to explain it. They're just going to have fun, right? And this is what this comic strip is for. Russell's always loved the Doctor Who comic strip, right? Love and Monsters was a Doctor Who comic strip he wrote. That was never done. And I was like, that's how it started.
Oh, was it really? No, I didn't know that. I either didn't know it or I'd forgotten it. No, I'm convinced of everything you've just said. I don't think they have no time to waste recapturing the British public with the TV show in exactly the same way that DWM didn't have a single panel to waste on doing just the same with us readers of this magazine. I haven't missed an issue of Doctor Who magazine throughout the last few years, although even and I've bought it consistently since 1981. The issues that I missed originally, I went back and bought those secondhand. So I've got literally everything, but I was so close to ditching Doctor Who magazine, certainly in print. Right, I didn't. I've kept with it, and now I'm back on board. And I'm glad I'm still there, because to see this happen, to see this not just the return of Lee Sullivan and Alan Barnes, who's a great writer, but this renewed sense of optimism and of direction and of identity that's across all of Doctor Who, mate, but particularly with the comic strip here too. And they're clearly so proud of it.
There's a real vigor to it. It's a little bit disappointing though, because I think Lee Sullivan, it's been 20 years, and you could tell it's been 20 years. Like, this is not his strongest work by a lot. I would say this is his weakest work. Which is a shame, right? Because the reason Lee Sullivan's doing it, not Russ Leach, who did it for the last 6 months, is because Russell D. Davies said, it's got to be Daleks. It's got to be huge. It's got to be big, right? Yeah. And if it's Daleks, it's got to be Lee Sullivan, right? That's how much he knows the property. That he knows who is the go-to artist for that.
Yes, for Lee Sullivan personally, and to the best of my knowledge, I think Lee did do some Doctor Who art for a part work for a little while, but this is certainly the first sequential Doctor Who stuff he's done, probably in that full 20 years. We've got his take on David Tennant's 14th Doctor here. He's definitely, the likeness is definitely still there, I think.
Oh yeah, absolutely. The likeness is, but I find the page design really lacks dynamism. Dynamism, is that the right word?
Yeah, dynamism.
Yeah, where that was really his strong point, right? He was able to do this great storytelling, and it's like, again, it's not like intricate navel gazing. There's this great storytelling, which was very 90s, very exciting, very like big, very like like big splash page final images. And this is just, it's a bit like, he's an older guy now. You can tell he's like in his 50s or 60s.
Well, Lee Sullivan was the artist, if you remember, gave us this giant poster with the Cybermen and the Daleks fighting in space.
Right. This was commissioned as the cover for a what was it? You've got these teeny tiny little Cybermen and Daleks you can paint on the
for the Citadel miniatures. Was it something like that?
No. It was like you had a model. You remember like the plastic model kits? Everything came on this thing. You had to like.
You had to sort of pull them out.
Right. So you had like a Dalek army and a Cyber army, and they were like teeny tiny figures, and they're all on you take them off. But yeah, I think it was either they paid for it or it was a joint thing because it was also a poster in Doctor Who magazine. Again,
well, if you remember, they put it
like build the drama in this, right? It's fun.
But if you remember, mate, they put this out originally across 2 Doctor Who magazine covers across the consecutive months, and then they put it out as a double poster. And it is, I mean, this just screams everything about Lee Sullivan is there. It's, it's lots of action. You say dynamism, explosions, Daleks at all angles. He loves the hover things as well, doesn't he?
Yes.
And in the strip as well, he gave us huge. There didn't seem to be any kind of ship or any amount of Daleks that Lee Sullivan was afraid to tackle, to bring to the page.
Right. I mean, it's somewhat of a shame now because like time has technology has replaced the skill, right? This skill of being able to draw a Dalek from any angle, you don't need it anymore. Nowadays, modern artists, they would use a 3D model in SketchUp or something of a Dalek, and they would just move it around and trace it. That's 100% how every artist would do this today. That he still doesn't by hand is meritorious. But again, it's just like time has moved on. We're not far away from not having artists anymore. These new AIs that draw, they are
disheartening.
A hair. Well, I don't know. For me as a writer, I'm quite happy about it. Quite frankly, I could knock out if once they get their technology down, right? And look, I'm an artist as well. I'm sure I could feed my artist into the AI so it could draw like me, right? So for me, for writers, it's a fabulous opportunity.
Just as with every kind of technological advancement in this area, speaking as an illustrator, as a graphic designer myself, it initially comes onto the scene and everybody's that impressed with what it can do, and pushes and pushes and pushes it, and then some time later, it seems to mesh with our own abilities, and we sort of, how can I put this? The balance starts to get somewhere in the middle again, rather than just, the program can do this, the program can do that. If I just put in X, Y, or Z command.
You're eventually going to need an artist to be able to manage the program, to be able to output it. You're not just. I don't think you're going to be able to just like have it vomit out artwork.
Well, do you remember when desktop publishing first came in?
No, I was. Well, actually, it depends. The 2000s, you mean, or before?
I'm thinking more like the early to mid 90s. Everything went quite sterile all of a sudden, and Doctor Who magazine did that too.
Everything was MS Publisher. Right. I do remember. You are right.
And it got and I'm sure it was very, very cost effective, and it looked quite slick at first glance. But after a little while, it just seemed really, really sterile. I've got a quote actually from Lee Sullivan here, and he said, 34 years after my first, and 20 years since my last, I'm back drawing the Doctor Who magazine comic strip, Time Travel Ace. He's a man of very few words, Lee Sullivan. I saw him drawing a Doctor Who strip once. I was at a convention, and he was there doing a sort of workshop, and it was very impressive. It was for the what's it called? It was the Mandragora story that he did with the Seventh Doctor and Ace. So I saw him there doing the pencils for a page, and then I think it was about 8 months later, saw the final finished thing in the magazine. It was, it was really nice to see that process, and inspiring as well. And he's also the artist who gave us the updated TARDIS console there for the Sylvester McCoy era. That would have been for season 27, hadn't it? I think that was
no. That easily mistaken. This was for the comic book, the comic strip only. Season 27 had the Mike Tucker TARDIS console, which was dangled from the ceiling. It was the first one.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. Yeah, there was a slight. The walls were quite similar, weren't they? The walls and the ceiling were quite similar.
They used the only time you ever saw it though was in not the second Doctor Who night, the first Doctor Who night they had on BBC Two, and it had Sylvester McCoy on a green screen, and Mike Tucker made a little model, and so that really worked very well. You see it occasionally on my thumbnails.
You have to use that now and again. Yeah, but
but I have both consoles, right? I got the Lee Sullivan one as well, right? I do have both consoles.
We've also got Alan Barnes too, who was the editor of Doctor Who magazine for a long time, but I think he worked on the comic strip for a little while afterwards. Certainly worked for Big Finish. Didn't he create Charlie Pollard for Big Finish?
Probably. I mean, yeah, I think, yeah, that would be him, wouldn't it?
I'm pretty sure it is. Sometimes the names get a little bit mixed up in my head, but he says here in this quote, "So they let me write the 14th Doctor's first adventure, which is being drawn by the amazing Lee Sullivan. What a thing. What a privilege. I hope everyone enjoys the ride."
I mean, look Alan Barnes is, I don't think he's written a dud. I really don't think. I can't think of a dud that he's put out. They've all normally been very, very solid, like in whatever medium, right? Why? Look, I hope he gets a tap on the shoulder to do an episode of the TV show, quite frankly, or one of the.
Surprising he hasn't. The amount of Big Finish that he's written, and the fact that he did in the Doctor Who magazine article that accompanies this strip, they mention that he was the writer of that Infinite Quest thing that David Tennant and Freeman Agyeman did.
Yeah, exactly.
They were saying
I reckon we're seeing a lot more of that stuff.
Well, they were saying, I'd love to, but they were saying how similar that was in some respects, because that was at 13 2-minute animated chunks that were put in that show Totally Doctor Who, and Alan was explaining in this article that with that he knew that he'd got to keep momentum going because people only got a couple of minutes of it every week, and so he had to keep changing locations. There had to be a set piece with every single installment, and how that carries through quite nicely to comic strips, because they did consider spending an extended time with the Doctor musing on his new physique, on his new face, with his new old face. But Russell T Davies and the new script editor, Scott Hancock, they sent the message along saying, "No, we don't want to waste any time." Just like you were saying, don't waste any time. Go. Yes. So what we've got is this strip. It's called Liberation of the Daleks. I don't know if Liberation of the Daleks is just the title of this part or the title of the whole thing, because the entire strip is going to be 13 parts.
Well, the whole strip, the whole 13 episodes is going to take place in the hour between Power of the Doctor.
Just 1 hour.
Right. So I think they're probably going to break it into a few stories, my guess. Every time I see Liberation of the Daleks, I keep saying, I think it says Libation of the Daleks. Right, I keep thinking the Daleks are having a tipple.
But no, I can't work out whether this is the full title or whether the umbrella title is the strip of a lifetime that I'm seeing banded around as well.
I guess we're going to find out. But isn't it fun to be curious? Like,
it is so much fun. And I think I'd forgotten, in the heat of it all, I'd forgotten that the comic strip in the magazine now is back down to being just 6 pages. It was around 10 pages for a while, wasn't it? And it's now been sort of squashed.
Yeah, it was. The only way they could bring it back was make it 6 pages. It wasn't. My guess is if the cells keep up the way it is, and the cells are going to keep up the way it is and grow, we're going to see it grow to 8-9 pages probably over this year, which will be great. I'm really up for that. You know, actually, you were just saying Infinite Quest. It made me think. Do you remember a few years ago, Netflix was trying to work out how to do interactive things to get people more engaged? They did that with Black Mirror.
Yes.
I bet you any money you like, we're going to see some kind of because we did this before in the Rusty Davis first era with the red button stuff.
Yeah.
Right, the red button, the music of the spheres. I reckon we're going to get some kind of interactive element to this via Disney Plus.
I was going to say I can't see. I think the iPlayer has red button doesn't really exist anymore. That's only recently been phased out in that respect. I think they now keep it for sort of teletext services and weather reports and things like that. I don't think the iPlayer could necessarily do that, but you're right. Disney Plus absolutely could. the way that it keeps evolving.
And I think they want to, because it's all about keeping people engaged, right? I think Doctor Who's going to be a big success at Disney Plus. I really think it's they are so. I mean, it might just be more of the same and another franchise they're going to just destroy, but it might well be. They really need something to work. I mean, Black Panther's tanking right now. We're recording this on Sunday the 13th. Black Panther's doing terribly, and it's another, like, nothing has done well. Absolutely nothing has done well for Disney. They need, and they're having massive layoffs now, just the same as Facebook, just the same as Twitter. They're cutting everything. It's eventually you get to a point where you can't sustain being disconnected from your audience, having your audience have disdain for you, right? And although I say this is your Doctor Who magazine, it just really says to me that as soon as you do something that isn't obnoxiously hateful to you, people will rush back to it.
It's immediately. I mean, I read the letter from the editor, and immediately, even because Marcus, at sometimes some months, and I always read that letter from the editor. I read pretty much every word of it, because that's the kind of connection I've got with the title. And some months he sounded like a broken man. Sorry, Marcus, but you have.
He did, especially when he had to do. Was it him who had to do the rating stuff? He always.
No, that's Tom Spilsbury.
Oh yeah,
who seems like the nicest bloke in the world.
Yeah,
but he has had to spin and spin and spin that. Yeah. So we got this comic strip. It's just the 6 pages. I thought this was a delightful little read, mate. I thought the likeness is, it's a different style than I've seen Lee Sullivan work in before. I think it's slightly sketchier. It's obviously now. I think that when he last drew on Doctor Who magazine, the strip wasn't even in colour, so that could be part of it too, because everything's gone so much more digital.
Apparently, it was Children of the Revolution. That's when it had gone into colour.
Oh, it had.
But, yeah, I mean, look, it could be that the budget's lower, so he had to spend less time on it.
Or maybe he's just had generally less time.
Right, but it's not terrible. The last page with the Daleks coming out, that's kind of fun.
Yeah, I'm quite impressed with this for what it is. I think he's got David Tennant's likeness really, really well. I think he's managed to communicate the fact that we're still in the 13th Doctor's terrible console room, and it's an awful design, very messy, but he's managed to kind of boil that down too, considering these are just a couple of panels. And I just like the general feel of the story. It feels like all baggage is just completely dropped from the television, from the comic. I think people could pick this up. Not that they're going to. It's £7 an issue. The cover price of this title is insane. So you're not going to get many casuals.
Like, isn't that normal nowadays?
I suppose. I mean, SFX is about £5.30, something like that.
SFX is like, I just saw my digital subscription was renewed. I was like, I wish it had enough of an impact on me that I would remember to cancel it.
No, well, I said to you the other, because I spoke to you on your YouTube channel about this. I said to me that feels like a magazine from 20 years ago. I would never consider buying SFX at the state that it's in now. I think Empire has kind of moved with the times, but SFX really hasn't. No, the story of this, I like the fact as well. I couldn't help but notice that the Doctor does seem drastically out of proportion with the TARDIS in this particular shot.
Yes. And also, was it on there's a policeman, I think, on the second page. Yeah. Do you have the full page of that?
No, I don't. No, I thought I wouldn't share full pages. That wouldn't be fair.
Well, here, I have a full page, but with the words blanked out. If you want to do it.
Yeah, hold on 1 second. Where are we?
So, yeah, that police... I'm not sure. It might be... Oh, God, he's towering over that TARDIS, isn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't even notice. Yeah, he really is towering over that TARDIS. Okay.
But I tell you what I did notice about this that I really like is the colouring. It looks to me.
Currents by James Effendi, I believe.
Yeah, no, that's not a name I've seen before. I noticed that the lettering is by Roger Langridge, who's worked on this title before, does all the Muppet stuff as well. But I didn't recognise the name of the colorist before. But this sort of slightly bleached out look, it reminds me of comics, British comics from the 70s into the early 80s in particular, where the pages were slightly yellowy.
Were they trying to like invoke the feeling of the 70s, you think, or 60s?
The 70s of the mid-afternoon and that sort of dusky sunlight as well. And then you got the twin towers there of the old Wembley Stadium, the late lamented.
When they remade Wembley, why did they just keep those towers?
There's no idea.
Stupidest thing ever. And like, God, all these corporate morons, just making. And that's really why the world's not doing so great. Too many overeducated idiots making decisions. But yeah, look, the very, very Britishy setting of 1966 World Cup, very Rusty Davies as well, right? It's everything's very big
and just like Alan Barnes says, when you've got something that's got the visual look of this, I mean, okay, there's not many 12-year-olds that are going to recognise the old Wembley Stadium now, but everybody else will. So we immediately know where we are, even before we've read the speech bubble. Just fantastic. And to say we've only got those 6 pages to play with, Svi.
Yeah, but I get the feeling the 6 pages did hamper the storytelling a bit. Right, that's the basic vibe I got. But listen, it's a fun little story. I found the aliens that turned out to be very generic comic book aliens. Right, it was like, it was the ones the most generic aliens since. Do you remember Invaders from Gantak, which was a 5th Doctor story?
Yes.
7th Doctor. Yeah, 7th Doctor story. And it had the most generic aliens of all time in it. It's them. It's as generic as that.
I've forgotten about that. That was Martin Garati drew that. What it brought to mind to me, what it brought to mind for me were these characters from the End of Time, the Vimvoci.
Yes. Yeah.
To me, they seem really Russell T Davies character. They've got bright blue skin rather than bright green skin.
I thought they were pink, weren't they? Or purple?
Maybe you're right. Actually, maybe you're right. But they are very Russell T Davies era creations.
Yes. I get the feeling we're back in that Rusty Davies era again, right? I do get that feeling. One of the other things they let drop in this issue was episode 7, script 7 anyway.
Yeah.
Is set in Roswell. It's set in Roswell, New Mexico, isn't it?
It's set in 1947, but yeah, that was the year of the Roswell crash. So
right.
We can.
So I really hope, right? I really hope we get that. I'm assuming it's a shooting story. That if it's in America in 1947, of course they're going to reference the skin color. Of course, it's going to be part of the narrative, right? I can almost guarantee when we see that episode, we're not going to groan. We're not going to feel lectured to. We're not going to feel a finger waved at us. I think
no, it's a massive difference, isn't it?
Yeah, I think we're going to be like, yeah, that was really good. We completely agree, right? Because a lot of people are saying, aren't you scared it's going to be as politically motivated or woke, for want of a better word, than that has been in the last
the terrible
years.
Chris Chibnall material. Yeah, I get that all the time. In fact, there are masses of people out there who just assume they're committed to the narrative that it will be no matter what. They've made up their minds, and I won't name names. There's people that I know personally have made up their minds. I'm not going to try and convince them otherwise.
Whenever I'm answering my people in the comments who feel that way, maybe they're right. Maybe they're
exactly.
right.
We can't say for certain.
I hope they're wrong, and more than that, I hope they're eventually won over, right? I mean,
that's all we can do. Just say if you're out, you're out. I quite understand. We can agree to disagree. But another thing I'd like though is this is for it to go back to being a bit more British, just like this comic strip is. And yes. I wanted to ask you about this because when I was looking at this page with the football match on, it immediately reminded me of the Tides of Time, the Dave Gibbons strip back from the early 80s.
yes, it did. It's got that, that English whimsy, right? And again, this is something I think Disney want. This is something that was valuable to Disney, right? That it was very British, right? Because I think it being British is part of its DNA and part of its international appeal, especially in the US, right? They love it, the Britishness of it, and I think they very much leaned against that in the Chibnall years. But again, go back and watch Rose. It's so like consciously British. You got the London Eye, you got Westminster Bridge, you got big red buses. And I remember at the time, Russell Davis was like, we want to have all that stuff, right? We want it to be very, very Britishy.
It was Tony Blair's Britain, if you know what I mean. So, but that doesn't. But it was very, very, very British, just as you said. Whereas Stephen Moffat's was, he was also very, very British. But it was probably J.M. Barrie's Britain, or it was a slightly more historical, a more fantasy version of what Britain is and was. Whereas Russell's was more very much anchored to the time. I'd like to see somewhere in between for that.
Right.
But an aspirational Britain. I think the little village that Amy Pond lives in the 11th Hour, villages like that, they do exist still in Great Britain. They do exist, but they don't. They visually kind of look like that, but they don't. You go to a little village like that, and it will be largely like that, but you may notice in the distance there'll be a mobile phone mast against some sea. So it would look look quite as idyllic, but it's still recognizable. And those markers of being in Britain are what I really want from the show. And in the strip as well. It's just a little thing, I know, but of course I suppose the big reveal was the Dalek ship.
Honestly, I think what you're pointing out was far more important. Because it was very, very unfashionable to like being British, right? Over the last few years, but back by the 50th anniversary, when it's the Queen's Silver, was it whatever Jubilee it was?
Yeah,
it was totally fine, right? It was totally fine to be flag wavingly British, right?
Well, do you remember those Daleks? You could buy a Dalek with the Union Jack.
The Union Jack Dalek, yes. It was as British as the Spice.
In fact,
right?
If you look on a lot of American content makers who make content about Doctor Who, most of them have one of those Daleks on their shelves behind them or somewhere in the collection.
The Americans do like that, and again, I think this is what Rusty Davis wanted to do, right? I think he had an idea that made it a win-win-win. I think he had an idea of being able to present something that fitted into the more divisive Disney worldview, right? Which is progressive, shall we say, without getting into a lot of details, and at the same time make it very, very traditionally Doctor Who and everything Doctor Who should be, right? And making it entertaining. I think it's a win-win-win, frankly. I think this embracing of nationalism, which is what it is a very good sign.
And I suppose that if you think that clearly Russell and Scott Hancock, the new script editor, they've been involved in this comic strip. So to anchor it to this particular time in English history, kind of says that they may be emotionally back in that place.
I hope they are. Wouldn't it be great if they are? Oh, just imagine.
Yeah. Well, you're right. I mean, we've been certainly in Britain, it's almost been sold to us, the idea that it's almost immoral to be proud to be British at the moment, and that's awful. If we're not allowed to how can I put this, to judge people for who they are individually as regards any one of a number of characteristics that they may have, then why should a sense of national identity be any different to that? Indigenous, British, English, Scottish, Irish, or Welsh people.
There's no rhyme or reason to these rules that we live by today.
Ridiculous.
There's no consistency. It's whatever. It's all based around whatever people feel like at the time, right? That's really it.
I mean, you could say that moment, that's a standard Lee Sullivan Doctor Who moment, isn't it? It's perfect for him. You can imagine that.
Well, I tell you, I find the whole page makeup are just a bit dull, right? The next page is better when the Daleks finally come out.
Yeah, the Daleks come out of the hatch. I didn't want to spoil that too much for people, trying to get people to encourage people to buy it. If they can find it.
It's Daleks in it. You know, like, whenever this is going out, they've had spoiler time.
Oh,
right?
Yeah,
I'm sorry. The Daleks are in it. It's a Doctor Who magazine comic strip, and they said they wanted it. It's called Liberation of the Daleks. You can expect to see some Daleks, okay? They're going to be there.
So what do you think of part 1 of this then, mate? I mean, you think I know you said the artwork could be better. I mean, does it live up to the potential there for a restart?
Oh, so it's a fun restart, right? I don't think it's as good as they wanted it to be. The heart's in the right place. It was a little bit too brief to like get any idea of it, but I think it's going to be it's going to be 13 parts. That's 60, 72, so it's going to be 78 pages long. That's the length of the graphic novel now. And I think that by the time we get there, I think this is going to be like a 4-part story within the 13 part or the 5 part.
Yeah,
and I think by the time we get to the rest of this, I think we need another episode to evaluate the story. I think we're in safe hands. Okay, I mean, even if it's a little bit, the artwork is a bit dull, I think we are in completely safe hands. And probably by the next episode or two, Lee Sullivan will be, shaking off some of the cobwebs.
Maybe that's what it is. I was about to say, could be that he is doing the pencils on this. Maybe it's closer to the publication date that we're aware, and once he gets to grips with this again, refamiliarizes himself with drawing Daleks and the rhythm of Doctor Who, as you say, shake off some of the rust, and we'll get some real vintage stuff. And do you think they'll collect it in due course, the entire story?
Of course they're going to collect it. Yes. It's
13 times 6. What? So it'll be well over 70 pages worth of material with some supplementary.
It'll be 78 pages plus probably another 20 pages of bonus material. And then there's plenty of other stuff they'll throw in. Right? I'm sure there's more. It doesn't seem we're going to be hurting for content, over the next few years.
Providing people can actually get it, though. I said to you yesterday that this issue of Doctor Who magazine, it's selling out. Here's some of the listings from eBay. This is as of time of recording. For all I know, this could have gone up even more by the time we drop this video. So yeah, it's £22.99, £26, £29 with £3 for postage there. They've gone from a magazine that couldn't really sell anymore, right, to being a magazine where they
like incredibly valuable. It's crazy. Will we get another printing? I don't know. But I bet they're happy at Panini. That's for sure. I bet they're like, what the hell happened? Welcome back, Russell Davis. We're glad to see you. I think it's what's going on there.
I really feel for the people who haven't got a hold of it, and who might not be able to either without having to pay those sort of hiked up prices.
I know. I switched to digital years ago.
Yeah, just make the leap. So given the fact we've got those aliens that appear in that comic strip that we were talking about, they're either bright blue. I'm convinced they were blue, but you said they could be bright pink. I don't know.
Right now, they're totally purple.
Oh, somewhere in between. Okay. So we've got these new aliens. Could those aliens, because they have said that some of the characters from the strip are going to appear in the TV?
No. They are way too generic, right? There is no way.
They're very Russell T Davies.
They're way too generic. Here, what's that? I'll throw it up for you. 1 second. I'll get a bit of it on the screen for you so you can see it.
Because
here, 1 second. There you go.
Oh, yeah, they are very, very purple. You're quite right.
This was like Lee Sullivan put together. There was no reference for them. You can tell. If they're going to be in the show, there would have been reference for them, and it would be much more well put together. Do
you remember Coneheads?
Yes. Yes, it's kind of the same thing.
That's what they remind me of. But what I'm thinking of is that, okay, if characters like that, maybe not them, but if characters from the strip are going to appear in the TV show, that would work, because we do know that characters from the comic strips past are about to appear in the telly, don't we?
Baby.
We've got these characters from the Starbase strip.
Race Warriors.
Yeah, so anything
it really is a very good representation of them as well, right? I really
unmistakable.
What's going on.
It's unmistakable. It's not as if, because there were people saying, "Well, how do you know that it's the same characters from the comic strip?" Just go and look at a picture of
it looked like Dave Gibbons just drew that. Okay, I mean, yes, it's incredible. It's not exactly the same, but it's got Dave Gibbons' artistic style. It really genuinely has. It's very, very bizarre, but they do.
No, I agree. That sort of segmented.
So the question is, are we going to be seeing Meet the Beep in the comic strip? I'm going to say probably. I'd
say so. Yeah, I'd say so. And this sort of embracing of the comic strip in line and bringing it into line with the TV show, do you think it's just something they'll flirt with just for this year, or do you think they'll stick with it and sort of build an extended universe?
It's going to be for the rest of this next era, right? You have times when it like gets much closer. So I think since 2005, they've always had the TV companions, and I think that was in 2005 was somewhat of Russell Lee Davies' insistence. Like, I think he loves Izzy and all the people we got rid of.
Yeah.
You know, those ones. But I think he really wants it to reflect the TV show, right? So yeah, I think it's going to be very, very closely connected, and it depends on your headcanon how much how canonical it is, right? That's really the bottom line. It's the way the comic strips have always been. So it's I do like the kind of like meta quality of it. This is how I feel about it. When Star Trek Discovery started up and we started seeing this stuff when Brian Fuller was in charge, and it still looked like it'd be very good. When we all saw the initial design for the new ship Discovery, which was based on the unused Phase 2 Starship Enterprise from the
Planet of the Titans or whatever it was.
Yeah, so we were all that was very, very encouraging. That was very, very exciting. It shows a knowledge and respect of the property, which I think we have permeating every aspect of it. Plus, it looks like Russell's really, as well as like being very professional, making a lot of money, and putting together this product. I think he's having a lot of fun. I think Russell's having a lot of fun.
That's definitely the impression that I get, and his ambitions for the property, for the Whooniverse, they seem to encompass sort of multiple TV shows. So why not bring the audios? Why not bring in the audios? Why not bring in the comic strip? Why not sort of make it all a little more tighter and interconnected? Not overnight, but just bring it in from the corners like this. It could be the dawning of a real new era here, and it could banish some of the demons of the past. I really do feel like we've all woken up out of the shower over the last 3-4 weeks. It's been. I don't know. The only other question I've got for you really is how do you feel about David Tennant coming back now? Because we've been living with this news now for around 5 or 6 months. It feels very right, doesn't it? Some people it's not sitting well with, but that it seems to me to be from very ideological places. They seem to be looking at it not as a fan, but almost from an activist's point of view. That they did the right thing, didn't they?
That's exactly the pushback, right? And honestly, I would say the toxic support. The last era had toxic fans that it attracted in a really big way, right? But I don't think it was about liking the show. I don't think it was everything about liking the show. I think it was more what having a female Doctor Who represented. Right, and honestly, if they were able to make it entertaining, it would have worked, but they just weren't, right? And it's I do get the feeling Russell Lee Davies is coming along to try and do the messaging that they very much wanted to do in the Chris Chibnall years, but do it in a way that works, right? The way that actually lands and connects to people. I think this issue of Doctor Magazine as well. He talked about not wanting to put David in Joda's outfit because bottom line, it's going to look silly, right?
Even that caused, and clear reality caused a fuss out there.
It really did. I mean, like, I understand that there's a lot of people who will like it to be a genderless world. I think it should be. It'll be better. I don't know if it is. I doubt it. It will be better. But I'm not going to say no. But it's not. The bottom line is it's not. And like your average normie watching this is going to be like, well, that looks silly. Why is he wearing that? Right? And it will be used against him forever.
Mate, everybody looks silly in that costume. Exactly. Jodie Whittaker is right about that. If that's what unisex means, that everybody looks like a dickhead, she's absolutely right. But you mentioned Star Trek.
Nailed it 100%.
You mentioned Star Trek a moment ago, and it got me thinking as to what this comic strip reminds me the most of, as regards not just a piece of fiction, but a place in the franchise. And it's this that was put out in 2008. It's called Star Trek Countdown. And it was the first time they'd done... Yeah. So this bridged the gap between Star Trek Nemesis, didn't it, and Star Trek 2008, as it was originally called, but it eventually came out in 2009, the J.J. Abrams film. So you've got Leonard Nimoy playing Spock with Patrick Stewart as Jean-Luc Picard there. And this, for those who needed it, who wanted it, this took the story, didn't it, from the original universe into the J.J. verse, the idea being to make it seamless for those who needed it. For those who didn't care, everything you needed to know was still on screen when that film came out. And I think that's what these specials are going to be like for the 60th anniversary. It's going to be the Doctor Who that people remembered from when they liked it. And for us, we can follow this comic strip along every month, each 6-episode chunk, as I'm going to be doing here on Type 40 Extra, fingers crossed. And yeah, just not necessarily be more informed about the story that's coming, but just be sort of stoked up a little bit more for it, have our appetite whetted a little, and maybe feel like we are on the inside track of something that could end up being absolute gold again, just like you said. I so hope so, mate. Thanks for this. Thanks for coming on and talking about this. I knew you were the right guy to ask. Do you want to plug the channel? As always, mate, tell people where they can find you on Twitter and Instagram and all those places.
It's not on Instagram. I'm too old. Okay, I should be on Instagram. I'm not on Instagram. Okay, you can find me on YouTube mainly. YouTube and Rumble. Look for the Rabbi from Another Planet. I'm on Twitter at Biblical Comics and Facebook. I'm just around. You'll find me somewhere.
He's everywhere. Try stopping in. And you can catch me, as always, on Instagram and Twitter as the Spacebook, where I'm wheezing and groaning, ranting and raving about all things geeky inside and outside of the TARDIS. Get in touch. Leave us a comment in the comment section. Let us know what you think. Have you been able to get hold of Doctor Who magazine number 584 yet? If so, how much did you pay for it? Where did you find it? And let us know your thoughts about this brand new comic strip, Liberation of the Daleks. Where do you think it's going? Do you think those pinky, purpley characters, do you think they're going to turn up in the TV show? Or do you think Speed's right and there's no chance of that happening? What do you think about Lee Sullivan's art? Do you think he needs just a little bit of time to get back in the groove to things? And where do you think the story's going? Let us know in the comment section. Thanks for joining me again this time, mate. And thanks to you guys for watching. More of this soon. You lot take care. I'll speak to you again later. Bye-bye.